noticed in politics was Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I would take Cornel West and I would take Louis Farrakhan out of that group you have there. And Martin Luther King had begun something, and once he got away from the religion part and talking about going to heaven, then that's when the white community decided that he was a dangerous Negro. But again, another reason why we can't get together, young brother, is they dismantle us as an ethnicity. In other words, you have white Irish, you have white Italian, you have white other Anglo-Saxons from Europe who are white, who know their ethnicity. Therefore, they will come together for the benefit of their ethnicity and the country back in Europe. But they took our names, our culture, our religion, and they really threw us in a barrel like a bunch of baits, and we don't know which way to go. So,
thanks, Alabama.
Well, let me say this. The plantation of the mind is the most subtle form of enslavement. I think one of the biggest problems that African Americans have to face is that there's a black orthodoxy we have developed where we don't really look at issues and problems in the sense of trying to understand how to deal with them, but it gets funneled through the issue of blackness. And going back to what Deborah Dickinson was saying, that I think it's time that we try to go beyond that. Not saying that we should not have group cohesion, but there really has to be a greater emphasis on looking at problems and solving them not through the prism of blackness, which I think certain people use, like Farrakhan, and just really try to develop ideas and mechanisms to solve very concrete problems.
Lakeland, Florida.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, I can't believe that Norman Kelley would ignore wonderful people like Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, the women in Congress, Bill Cosby, athletes, O.J. Simpson. I mean, why does he have to keep the separation of Americans? We're all Americans, and your choice of models is a very bad choice of models. Why can't you choose the ones who have succeeded and are continuing to succeed because they're Americans, not because they're black?
Well, I consider Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell part of a group which I call pet Negroes. And pet Negroes are those African Americans that, you know, certain groups of white people tend to look at, and they speak properly, they're non-threatening Negroes and things of that nature. Well, the fact of the matter is, you know, black people and white people do have a separate history. Now, on one level, you can say, well, you ought to get over slavery, and to a certain degree, I do think that. However, it is a fundamental, race is a fundamental issue in this country, whether you like it or not. Now, my attitude is basically, I understand that. When I get up in the morning, I take a shave, I look in the mirror, I know who I am. I don't have to worry about being black. I don't use that as an albatross around my neck, but I try to figure out ways to circumvent that. Going back to people like Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, in my opinion, is America's most competent and simultaneously incompetent person in the United States government, because as a national security advisor, this stuff was on her watch, and because she wasn't thinking flexibly about what was going on in regard to rogue nations, that Al-Qaeda was able to slip through using a flexible idea from production and management which corporations use, and they were able to attack the United States. Colin Powell will probably have the burden of being a person who could have stopped this war, but said nothing because he just told the president, "I'm with you, Mr. President."
We are out of time. This is the book, The Head Negro in Charge Syndrome. It's by Norman Kelley, and it's in your bookstores. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.